Well, good afternoon. I'm going to try to make this, this is still a hot mic. I'll work through a number of things. Actually, this is a presentation as the owner buying the product that perhaps you're selling. I know you two are going to be from the university or in Casper, going to be putting in a system. How many other people here are end users? Resellers? Consultants? Probably the bulk. So a little bit about my background, and I'll move into this. I had my own consulting company for about 30 plus years, so I guess I'm seasoned too, and was involved in building data centers, call centers. Omaha was kind of the birthplace of the call center industry. That was kind of an outcome of a lot of infrastructure was put in to support the Strategic Air Command. They never used it. We ended up with all this tremendous resources, and it really created an environment that everything lined up, and so a lot of things developed in Omaha. One company in Omaha I did a lot of work with was handling 92% of all credit card transactions in the United States. And they had set up call centers around the country. So over the years, I had the opportunity to work around the US, Philippines, Central America, in dealing with customers in terms of all types of infrastructure and telephony systems. My first customer is Nebraska Furniture Mart, largest retailer in the United States. Buffett buys them with a handshake. My other customer is Borsheim's, largest jewelry store in the United States. Anybody been there? You have? He buys them with a handshake. I did work for an insurance company. He buys them. I was doing work with the Omaha World Herald. He buys them. I just gave up. I said, I might as well just go to work for Mr. Buffett. So about a year ago, I joined with BH Media Group. And so I had some experience with Asterisk. In my consulting efforts, was involved in a startup that could have turned into a PayPal. Sean here was instrumental in doing a lot of the programming of the Asterisk and database integration. The startup came to me and said, can you do the consulting to help stand up a phone system, database integration, and they laid out their whole requirements. I said, I'm thinking $150,000, $200,000, and I said, how much is in your budget? And they go, $8,000. And I said, whoa, okay, we have to talk. And interestingly, the Asterisk-based system came in a little bit above their budget. And that included a small call center, their office system, and a number of other things that they did in terms of database integration. Then set up some Asterisks for some nonprofits. And so that gave me some background in terms of this strange thing called Asterisk. So when I came on board with BH Media Group, it was interesting how all of that past experience really was helpful. This, by the way, is a picture of a printing facility. It's about a 500,000 square foot facility in Richmond, Virginia area. Obviously, one of our printing sites. The little yellow thing is a robot. It picks up 2,500 pound rolls of paper and transports them around, loads them in the printing machine, and it's all in a completely automated system, unbelievably expensive, but it's highly productive. And it's amazing if you've never been at a printing facility and see how much newspapers are being printed and how they're being printed and what's that whole aspect of it. It's quite a fascinating industry. Okay, Berkshire Hathaway formed BH Media Group. It's headquartered in Omaha. That's our corporate office building there. Our group includes print and digital media newspapers. Now, when I shut my business down and I went to work for a newspaper, everybody thought I was, what would you say? Go ahead. Yes, crazy, okay? And I thought, this is going to be interesting, but I'll write it, see where it's going. And in a year, it completely changed my whole view. So, either Mr. Buffett is crazy or he's smart as a fox. Time will tell, but it has really changed my whole view of this particular industry. We're in acquisition mode. We went from 23 papers with 2,000 employees to 90-some with over 4,500 employees in less than 18 months, and that's been a challenge. We anticipate additional acquisitions. There's just some of the logos of some of the properties that we currently have and adding more and more. But that's a tremendous amount of growth in a very short time period. These, the yellow states represent the areas that we own properties in, and so our 90 properties are scattered across this area. Really, the Omaha World Herald was in Nebraska and Iowa, a couple of properties down south, and then all of a sudden we added all of these properties up and down the East Coast. Challenges. It's an old industry. I mean, Omaha World Herald was founded in 1885. As an industry, newspapers are closing. How many have heard newspapers having trouble? Okay. So, subscription and advertising revenues are stagnant or decreasing. There's new forms of competition. So that's an interesting industry to invest in, isn't it? Okay. We're transitioning from print to digital. We've figured out the hard way that you just can't provide a digital copy of the print. You try to serve up a PDF of a print, it does not work. It's a terrible user experience, and that model has completely failed. Society and technology is changing the way that information is disseminated and paid for, so we're dealing with all of the aspects of going from, again, print to mobile technologies, web. But there's some tremendous opportunities. One is communities with a strong local identity represent growth opportunities. You need to find communities that they have a strong identity and people are involved in what's going on in their community. Now, how many of you are living in a different place than where you were born? Okay, are you interested in the hometown you were raised in? Some do, some are not. And what we're finding is people want connections. They want to know what happened to their neighbors, to their friends, what's going on in a lot of those communities. So communities that have a strong local identity represent a growth opportunity. There's opportunities to produce relevant and timely content. That's where the digital really comes in. Efficient delivery for both print and digital opens new markets. Advertising revenues outside traditional home markets. Okay, we're in Omaha. We have a large group of readers in Florida and in Arizona. Now, we can mail them a newspaper, but they're getting advertisements from Omaha. But when they're getting a digital delivery and we know where they're coming from, all of a sudden now we can look at selling digital advertising in their market. This is a game changer, because if we know how many people happen to be in a certain market and we're doing the analytics correctly, we now have opportunities to sell advertising that reaches way beyond our traditional markets. Digital delivery is currently web, mobile, and apps. I would say that, the mix depends a lot. The app is growing tremendously as far as the delivery mechanism. Give you an idea, Omaha World Herald is number 52 of all U.S. papers in terms of circulation, but we're number 2 in terms of combined print and digital readership. We get about 18 million page views a month from 1.2 million unique visitors. That's a pretty tremendous amount of traffic for digital delivery. We reach 80% of almost 900,000 adults that live in our market area, and so 80% of those have either seen a digital or printed version of our paper every week. And so we're considered almost a small newspaper, but we're number 2. And one of the differences it has made is that we have really looked at the digital delivery and have put a lot of focus in that particular arena. Opportunities, social media technologies, how do we monetize content? How many of you hit a paywall when you're going and reading some article on Google now? You can get so far into the article and wham, you hit a paywall. Well, there's good and bad about a paywall. The bad is we give content for free to Google and they make a lot of money off of it. You put a paywall up, you don't get your information out. So the industry is really working through a lot of these type of things. Customer experience is a key impact. We're quite frankly, we're not doing a good job in terms of customer experience. And this is really where Asterisk and the type of things that you've heard at this conference here will impact us there. And again, how do we become more efficient? And my arena is in effective and low-cost communications. Some of the changing trends. Okay, here's a question. Place and time of the day that has maximum mobile usage for getting newspaper delivery. Okay, where? Where is the place that that happens? Take a guess. Mornings. Anybody else? Evenings. Okay. What time of day? Okay, so that's, what about the place? Home? Where else? Break? Work? The number one usage happens to be in this area at home between 7 and 9 p.m. Now, we never expected this, because most people will have a print version at home. You'd think they'd be reading it or wrapping a fish in it or whatever, but they're sitting at home watching television and they're on their mobile device getting the latest content. Now, if you're putting out a morning edition paper, how does that help the customer that's accessing it digitally at 7 and 9 p.m. at night? Not very well. So, again, timely information is critical. So, analytics and research is absolutely key, and that's one of the areas that, from a technology standpoint, that we're really having to ramp up, is that, which again ties into many of the things we've heard from this conference of being able to get the kind of data to do the kind of analytics that we need to do. Some of the IT strategic initiatives. I came on board, I got tasked with, okay, develop our IT strategy for unified communications. You have 1 month. Well, that's not a lot of time to come up. Actually, I came to Astricon right about that time last year, first time, and it was such an eye-opener. I got to tell you that this conference really helped us come up with that strategy. Leveraging technologies, many of what you've heard about here. We're already talking about WebRTC and how that would impact what we're doing in terms of our industry. Replacing POTS lines, PRIs, point-to-point T1s, OC12s, OC45s, MPL, and we stood up an MPLS network, VPN network, going to VoIP, so that was a major project. Technology refresh. Here is the kicker. Reduce telecom costs by 30% the first year, and after I get that accomplished, then I've got target goals for years 2, 3, and 4. So the directives are to keep driving down our cost. We started off, we spent about $2.1 million a year on telco services, and so that's a large number. But if we can drive that down by 30, 40, 50%, that's some significant savings in terms of our expenses and our overheads. Improving customer experience. This was a key one. How do we add new acquisitions to an enterprise platform? It has to be expandable, has to be flexible, has to be something we can deploy quickly, because we have projections to triple our size. So when we're doing designs for data centers and other infrastructure, we're looking at, okay, what we have here, and then we're having to take that times 3. IT governance and framework standards. Didn't hear a lot about this in the conference. This is absolutely key, absolutely. If this industry, if this open source world is going to make a severe impact into the marketplace, absolutely have to look at IT governance issues and all the standards. We've adopted COBIT as a framework, using NIST as some standards, but one of the things that we're also involved doing with this organization is raising the bar in terms of IT governance. Currently, we have over 270 IT projects, 90 are high priority. So that's give you a little bit of scope of what we're dealing with. On these acquisitions, we've ended up with Cisco VoIP systems, Avaya, Nortel, Merlin, Roam, Panasonic, NEC, 3CX. You ever hear of 3CX? It's a Windows-based software IP system, and we have one property that has the 3CX system, about 500 POTS lines, a lot of PRIs. We have VoIP. We have point-to-point T1s, OC12, OC48s, QMO. Anybody ever hear of QMO? It's Quest, Metro Optical Ethernet, horribly expensive. So we have all of these legacy systems out there, and including DSL broadband wireless, private port internet, and a mix of network platforms. We just acquired a property that has Bay Network switches. They're running Novell and Lotus Notes. Now, how many of you, how long has it been since you have seen Novell? 10 years? 20 years? So when we are acquiring properties, generally it's a whole forklift. We have to come in and upgrade their entire technology platform. Typical site. This was the Winston-Salem site. Lead-covered phone cable put in 1930s, and we're trying to run MPLS over that. You know, it's just an old industry. We have old infrastructure in many cases, and that has presented some interesting challenges. How about this? We call it the IT. You wonder. So we acquire a property and go in and do some audits, and we find things like this, and I have no idea what cable goes where in that particular place. This was so bad, by the way, the fire marshal came in and wrote them up, and that we had to get that site cleaned up. So phone strategy efforts. We evaluated different carriers for VoIP delivery. We evaluated centralized versus distributed VoIP. Corey addressed some of those things in his presentation. How do we leverage our new MPLS WAN and our VPN? We evaluated various IP phone systems. Looking at the TCO, total cost of ownership, and return on investment. Return on investment's really hard, quite frankly. You know, how to actually determine what is your return on investment. And it takes a lot of work to be accurate in doing an ROI. A TCO is pretty straightforward. We evaluated and selected a prime vendor. Addressing risk mitigation is absolutely key. Getting management approval. Until you get management approval, you're not going anywhere. So that's an absolute important aspect. And then implementation. So these were the efforts that we had to work through. Looking at the Gartner quadrant, here's a number, and this was out of, I think, 2011, a number of players in the area. We took a look at a number of them, and we took an extra hard look at Cisco, ShoreTel, and Digium as platforms to evaluate. At the end of the evaluation, we came to this conclusion. No one vendor met all our needs. Well, that was an interesting conclusion. It'd be nice to say one vendor could meet all the needs. And what we really came to understand is we needed a platform because we had so many different challenges. A platform to build on made the most sense for our business. We looked at 7 VoIP solutions and reduced it to these 3. We then did a total cost of ownership. I'll have to say most TCOs are not very accurate, let's put it that way. But in a TCO, you not only have to include capital costs, you have to include your expense costs, one-time and recurring, your cost of capital or the value of money, the capital inflation rate, recurring cost indexing, and then play it out over how many years that you want to look at. Okay, so average cost per handset. So then we took these 2 systems we stood up, ended up dividing it by the number of handsets to come up with a means of evaluating. The initial cost for Cisco is $1,216. Does that seem reasonable? I mean, whenever you put out Cisco systems, I mean, we're seeing numbers between $1,000 and $2,000 per handset for a Cisco deployment. So this seemed to be in line with what we've been seeing out there, what I had seen as a consultant. The switch box was $525. Now you might think that's kind of high. We did some things. We put some extra efforts into the switch box deployment. We didn't want to have problems out of the chute, so we ended up using high-end Dell servers, and we did a number of other things like that. But I've run the numbers in different scenarios. Switchvox comes in somewhere between $400 and $500 per handset. Depends on the smaller the sites, the higher the cost. The interesting thing was on the evaluation, if we used Cisco as the base, was ShoreTel about 72% for installation cost, 60% life cost variance. Digium 47% initial, about 32% life cycle cost. That's a pretty significant difference. Now, a lot of people will focus on the $1,200 or the initial cost, but if I bring up, see if I can bring this up here. This is actually a TCO model that, and I don't know if it's going to display right. Oh, I guess it's off to the side is years, but here's the bottom line. There's the difference. A 10-year total cost of ownership for Cisco was $4,072 per handset. Digium ended up $1,279. Now, if you're the CFO or you're the CEO and you're walking through the office and every phone you look at is a $4,000 cost, what are you thinking? Ouch. Yeah, it's a big cost. Now, don't think that open source is free. It's not free. I actually ran a TCO using Asterisk, not Digium, and trying it in that. And you know what? There wasn't much difference, about 2% difference. So even if going, because you have to factor other things in, support costs and consultants and other factors like that. So I know we talk about this free, but it's not free. Now, if you go to the CEO and say you got a free solution, he's going to look at you and go, that doesn't make any sense to me. So, I mean, these are real costs based upon looking at all of the factors involved in standing up a system. Presenting to management. Do your homework. You have to think of every question they're going to ask and have an answer for it before you ever go in. Doing a good financial analysis is key to credibility. If they can shoot a hole in your financial model, you lose credibility with the C-suite. So that's an area that needs a lot of attention. Address risks. Besides cost, risk is a huge, huge factor that the C-suite is dealing with today. And then presenting, of course, options with costs and benefits. Here's an example of what not to do. I received this yesterday from the City of Omaha Planning Department, and in fact, I just pulled a permit with them for a generator installation. And I thought this was kind of interesting. They're introducing a new phone system. They're putting in a ShoreTel. The cost of ShoreTel is approximately $85,000. It'll come from their technology and training fund with no expense to taxpayers. Well, guess where the training fund came from? The taxpayers. So, but they go, the eventual cost savings is expected to be $53.46 annually. Now, just doing a rough calculation, what's the ROI on that? Like 15 years. Actually, if you punch it into the model, you'll find there is no ROI. It's the other way. So you come to management with this kind of presentation, you've lost all credibility. And it's interesting that they would even say that, and they don't even say there will be a cost saving. Maybe the eventual savings would be that. But yet, I've seen the technology world, this is typically how we go to management. I had an executive tell me this, and it changed my whole paradigm of approaching the executives. He said, Martin, 50 times a day, somebody walks into my office or calls me on the phone and jumps up and down and screams, the world is falling, the world is falling, I need money, I need money. And I'll give them money. And next week, they come back, the world is falling, the world's falling, and I need money. And he says, what differentiates you from the other 49? Put yourself into their, everybody's coming to them wanting money, wanting to do something. If you're not differentiating what you're presenting to them from everybody else, you're just getting lost in the static. What are some of the major decision factors? When they're looking at a project, how accurate are the costs? Key factor. How are you addressing risks? Here was our risk management strategy. Diverse SIP routing from a carrier. We have 2 routers, one in Houston, one in Chicago, and they hit our proxy. Yesterday, during the session, the Chicago one failed. Everything seamlessly flipped over to the Houston. So, putting redundancy routing in. Using a commercialized version of Asterisk. Management's very comfortable with open source if it's commercialized. So we just said to them, look, this VoIP system is just like Red Hat. Oh, we get it. That was the end of the open source discussion. That's how fast it happened. They're comfortable with that. Going with standard hardware. That's why we actually are standing up systems in our VM environment and putting them on our, we're a Dell shop. Addressing redundancy and recovery, qualified vendors, having support agreements, and of course project and resource planning. So where are we at? We're using Asterisk as a core foundation platform, Switchbox for our VoIP PBX. We're looking feature servers, including enterprise fax servers, VM servers, voicemail servers for legacy PBX. That's a project actually we're having to ramp up on. And IVR with database integration is some of the other things that we're doing. We actually have to stand up a couple call centers, and we're looking at using Asterisk as a core with add-on packages on top of that. Gateways, we've been using Asterisk under the hood, Digium products in that regard. Here's my observations. Asterisk has created great opportunities. There's a lot of creativity in the Asterisk community. From our position as a user, it's a mature and capable platform. I would say this, we really need to improve how we are presenting this as a viable alternative to the C-suite. I don't think we're doing a very good job in this area. You know, it's fun to talk about hacking into systems and going in and punking your friend, but when you start talking about that to management, what have you just told them? I'm not going that direction. You know, I'd say the product is mature. To be blunt, I don't think the community is that mature. Now, that's from an owner perspective. Now, remember, I was a consultant sitting on your side of the table, and then I changed. So this is just something we have to address. And I think we can do it. And another area is the IT governance adoption is no longer an option. If we do not address this area, then this open source can die very fast. Because, believe me, the big players are addressing this. The PCI issues, the SOX issues, the HIPAA issues. Vicki had just told me, what's the thing? Next week, you can't call cell phones anymore without huge penalties. Do you know that? See, I mean, these are areas that we really have to address. But if we really look at the IT governance standards and frameworks that are out there, and think about that in terms of when we're developing and moving forward with this open source, that's a key to what I say is success. So that's kind of my quick view from an owner's perspective.